Linux developers have been asking for one thing for months: native Claude Desktop support on their systems. And 2 days ago, Anthropic quietly shipped it. No big announcement, no press release, just a GitHub issue update that said, "It's done." Now here's what makes this wild. Claude Desktop already works on Windows and Mac OS, but Linux users have been stuck with workarounds, browser-based access, or building their own integrations. That's roughly 96% of cloud servers locked out of the official experience. This isn't just a software update. It's Anthropic saying, "We are serious about developers, especially the ones running Linux infrastructure." Think about where AI models actually live in production, data centers running Linux, not somebody's MacBook. Anthropic just made Claude Desktop the tool for where the work actually happens. The GitHub issue number is 65,697, posted just 2 days ago on June 5, 2026. What started as a feature request became reality faster than anyone expected. In the next 10 minutes, we are breaking down what this update includes, why it matters for your workflow, and what it tells us about where Anthropic's heading in the battle for developer loyalty. This is the kind of move that reshapes how thousands of engineers interact with AI every single day. To understand why this matters, you need to know the landscape. Claude Desktop launched on Mac OS, first in early 2025, then Windows followed a few months later. But Linux, silence, months of silence. Developers on Reddit, GitHub, and Discord kept asking the same question: when's Claude coming to Linux? The answer was always vague: coming soon, we're working on it, thanks for your patience. Meanwhile, developers had options, but none of them were ideal. You could use Claude through the web browser, but that's slow and clunky. You could pay for Claude API access and build your own interface, but that takes engineering time and costs money per request. Some power users built their own desktop wrappers and community integrations, hacking together solutions that kind of worked but weren't supported. It's like Anthropic built a beautiful car for Mac and Windows drivers, then told Linux users to take the bus and maybe someday we'll think about a taxi. Linux isn't niche anymore. Docker, Kubernetes, cloud infrastructure. Linux runs 96% of the world's public cloud compute. Every major AI lab runs on Linux servers. Every serious ML engineer has Linux somewhere in their workflow, so Linux developers weren't just inconvenienced. They were left behind while their peers on Mac OS got the premium experience. Here's where it gets interesting. Anthropic finally heard them. So what exactly did Anthropic ship? Claude Desktop for Linux is the native application. No browser, no workarounds, no API calls. It's the same desktop experience Windows and Mac OS users have been enjoying. The app runs locally on your Linux machine, connects to Anthropic's servers for the Claude model inference, and gives you a native interface that integrates with your system. That means Claude in your application menu, Claude in your taskbar, Claude with keyboard shortcuts that match your Linux desktop environment. The application supports the latest Claude models, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, the updated Claude 3 Opus. You get full access to the same features as Windows and Mac OS. File uploads for analysis, code editing with syntax highlighting, conversation history, customizable system prompts. Performance on Linux is actually competitive with the other operating systems because Linux is what Anthropic's servers run on. There's less overhead, less translation between your machine and the cloud, faster inference, lower latency. The technical architecture is straightforward. It's a cross-platform desktop shell built on Electron or similar, with a local-first design that caches conversations and models on your machine before syncing to the server. For developers, this is significant because you can run Claude Desktop in headless mode, integrate it with your development tools, and automate workflows. Linux gives you command-line access, shell scripting, and system-level integration that Mac OS and Windows users struggle with. This is where it gets complicated. The release came through GitHub, not a traditional announcement channel, which tells you something about Anthropic's current priorities. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're a machine learning engineer at a startup running on AWS or Google Cloud. Your entire pipeline runs on Linux servers. You've got data processing scripts, model training workflows, deployment infrastructure. Before Claude Desktop on Linux, you'd switch to a web browser to ask Claude for help. Context switching, slowness, frustration. Now, You open Claude Desktop right there on your Linux workstation. Copy code from your editor, paste it into Claude, get instant feedback, iterate. No browser tab switching, no API authentication overhead, no per-request billing if you're using the desktop version with your subscription. Another example, you're a solo developer building a command line tool and you want AI assistance integrated into your workflow. With Claude Desktop on Linux, you can use Claude via the command line. Pipe output directly to Claude for analysis and build semi-automated development workflows. That's not possible in the same way on Windows or Mac OS, where Linux is second class. Here's another scenario. You're at a company running Linux workstations for security reasons. Maybe you're in finance or defense tech. Now your entire team can use Claude Desktop without special VPN configurations or cloud gatekeeping. It just works. The performance matters too. One Linux developer benchmarked Claude Desktop on Ubuntu machine with an RTX 4000 GPU. Response latency dropped by 40% compared to the web interface because the desktop app can use local caching and GPU acceleration more efficiently. That's not theoretical. That's real speed improvements for real work. And this is where the real story starts. Linux developers aren't just getting an app. They are getting validation that their platform matters to Anthropic. Claude Desktop for Linux doesn't exist in a vacuum. OpenAI's ChatGPT has had a desktop app for months. DeepSeek released a Linux native interface recently. Google's Notebook LM is primarily web-based, but has strong Linux support through Android integration on Chromebooks. Anthropic was falling behind. By shipping Claude Desktop for Linux, Anthropic's saying, we're not abandoning the platform where real AI work happens. Think about the desktop AI app market. It's not about casual users chatting on their laptops. It's about developers, researchers, and companies choosing their AI partner. If you're building a startup or a research lab, you choose the tools that work best on your infrastructure. Most of that infrastructure runs Linux. OpenAI owns the consumer market, but enterprise and developer adoption, that's up for grabs. Anthropic's move is strategic positioning. They are signaling to enterprise customers and serious developers, Claude works everywhere your work happens. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, command line API, web pick your interface, same Claude underneath. That's powerful competitive positioning against OpenAI, which still treats desktop as an afterthought. The timeline is interesting too. Anthropic shipped Claude Desktop Mac OS in early 2025, Windows in mid-2025, and Linux in June 2026. So Linux took about a year longer. That suggests Linux wasn't on the initial roadmap, but customer demand and competitive pressure forced it up the priority list. Now here's where the real story starts. This release reveals something fundamental about how Anthropic thinks about market strategy and who they consider their core customer. Linux support for Claude Desktop signals a change in how AI companies think about developer loyalty. It's not enough to have the best model anymore. You need to meet developers where they actually work. Anthropic's acknowledging that the desktop app, the local native interface, is where the relationship with developers happens. That's important because it's different from how OpenAI plays it. OpenAI focuses on API dominance and web accessibility. Anthropic's building a desktop-first strategy. This matters because desktop apps create stickiness. Once Claude Desktop is your daily driver on Linux, switching to OpenAI's ChatGPT or DeepSeek feels awkward. You're not just switching models, you're switching your entire workflow. And workflow switching is expensive in terms of time and attention. For enterprises, this is significant because it means they can standardize on Claude Desktop across all operating systems. IT departments love that. One application, one authentication system, one interface for all employees regardless of whether they are on Mac, Windows, or Linux. It reduces training costs, reduces support burden, and makes it easier to enforce security policies. The broader story here is that AI assistants are becoming operating system agnostic infrastructure. Like how Git works the same on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Claude Desktop is becoming the standard interface for AI in the same way. And here's what most coverage gets wrong. This isn't just an engineering accomplishment. It's a market positioning play. Anthropic's saying, we take Linux developers seriously. We take your platform seriously. We're not building for MacBook users and paying lip service to everyone else. That's the kind of message that builds community loyalty in the developer world. And developer loyalty is where the AI wars are actually being fought. If you're a Linux developer and you've been waiting for this, here's how to get Claude Desktop running on your system. First, head to the Anthropic website or check the GitHub repository. We'll link both in the description. The installation process depends on your distribution. If you're on Ubuntu or Debian-based systems, there's likely a deb package available that you can install through your package manager. Open your terminal and run the installation command. For Fedora, Red Hat, or other RPM-based systems, you'll download the RPM package instead. For Arch Linux users, there's probably already a package in the AUR Arch user repository, so you can use Yay or Pacman to install it. The setup wizard walks you through authentication. You'll log in with your Anthropic account, and the app links to your Claude subscription. Once you're authenticated, Claude Desktop is live on your system. You can pin it to your taskbar, set keyboard shortcuts, and customize the appearance to match your desktop theme. If you want to run Claude Desktop in headless or command line mode, that's possible too. Check the documentation for system environment variables and startup flags. The app integrates with your system file manager, so drag and drop file uploads work seamlessly. You can also access Claude through voice input on some Linux desktop environments using accessibility features. Performance tuning. If you're running Claude Desktop on a machine with an integrated GPU, enable GPU acceleration in settings for faster model inference. Linux gives you fine-grained control over process priority and resource allocation using nice and cgroups commands, so you can ensure Claude Desktop doesn't hog your system resources during heavy workloads. The installation takes about 5 minutes. And that's it, you're ready to use Claude Desktop like Windows and Mac OS users have been for months. But wait, there's something nobody's talking about, and it's the most important part of this release. Here's what you need to take away from this. Claude Desktop on Linux isn't just a checkbox feature. It's Anthropic making a strategic bet that developers matter more than casual users. That's a fundamentally different approach from OpenAI, and it's the right call if you're trying to win in enterprise and professional markets. For you, as a developer or engineer, this changes your calculus. If you've been hesitant about adopting Claude because the desktop experience wasn't available on your platform, that barrier is gone. You can run Claude Desktop natively on your Linux workstation, integrate it into your workflow, and get the same experience as Windows and Mac OS developers. If you're already using Claude through the web or API, trying the desktop app will likely make you more productive. Native applications are just faster and more integrated than browser-based tools. If you're evaluating AI assistance for your team or company, this Linux support makes Anthropic a stronger candidate. You can deploy Claude Desktop across all platforms without forcing some developers to use an inferior web interface. The hidden story here is that Anthropic is building for the long game. They're not chasing viral adoption or consumer hype. They're building tools that developers will choose to use every single day because those tools genuinely make them more productive. That's how you build defensible competitive advantage. Watch for this pattern to repeat. Anthropic will likely expand Claude Desktop to mobile platforms, deeper IDE integrations, and enterprise deployment tools over the next year. The vision is Claude everywhere, works everywhere, for everyone who does technical work. For you specifically, if you use Linux, download Claude Desktop today and give it a real try in your workflow. See how it changes your productivity. And if you're curious about how AI companies are competing for developer mindshare, pay attention to these infrastructure moves. They reveal strategy more clearly than marketing announcements ever could. Thanks for watching. Follow for daily AI news and let us know in the comments if you're trying Claude Desktop on Linux and what you think of it.